Hi, and welcome to this Cloud OS Week Transform the Data session. This is Understanding System Center 2012 R2 Service Manager. My name's Steve Beaumont. I am the Technical Director for Power On Platforms. I have a Twitter handle if anyone fancies joining me for some random rambling of thoughts, and that's at StevieBSC. I also help run, along with Simon Skinner, the UK-based Cloud OS community, which you can find the URL below. Occasionally I still keep my own blog up to date, but most of my content is now transferring across to the Cloud OS community. QR tag down there for those that like to actually point stuff at the screen and grab codes rather than typing. I am also one of the co-authors of the Microsoft System Center 2012 Service Manager Cookbook, along with a new one that we did recently, which was actually the Orchestrator Cookbook as well. I'm an MVP in the System Center Cloud and Data Center Management, and I'll be running you through Service Manager today. So the agenda for today, there's various bits that I want to actually get covered off. Number one, which is actually give you an introduction to what actually is System Center 2012 R2 Service Manager. We're then going to run through how to build a CMDB, which is your content management database, in around about 8-ish easy clicks. We're then going to look at how that CMDB is actually used to drive your service catalog to actually help you provide offerings to your users, which brings us nicely into how you can actually help yourself to help others help themselves, otherwise known as the self-service for short. And then just to round it off together, we're going to show how System Center Service Manager is actually better together with the massive powerful integration with the other System Center components to give a more rounded solution. So, when we talk nowadays about actually how we can help with the Microsoft solutions transform your data center and bring in the fundamentals around private cloud and hybrid cloud, I like to actually start to break down the different areas that are focused around delivering that. Now, these 5 key areas are what actually goes on behind the clouds, behind the scenes, and these are from a service management perspective, or an ITIL sort of approach. Now, Microsoft have always had a very strong focus and very strong component solutions around both the monitoring and configuration platforms. They're very mature products that they've had in terms of System Center Operations Manager and System Center Configuration Manager. Microsoft brought along some extra products within the provisioning area, and that'd be Virtual Machine Manager. And then in the protection area, they've also had things like Data Protection Manager and Endpoint Protection. So starting in 2010, Microsoft introduced a product called Service Manager. And then moving forward into the 2012 era, where they moved away from having them as all individual products and produced this suite of solutions, they actually then migrated it across to the Service Manager 2012 solution. Now, Microsoft had a very strong focus of, rather than being like many other vendors within the management space, of delivering key point solutions and very good individual products, they knew that to be able to actually deliver cloud-based methodologies within your data centers, the products actually had to have a lot more integration between each of them. So Microsoft made sure that with Service Manager, they made it very much the key focal area of the suite. This is where we can actually start to hook into all the different systems, start to look at all that information that's between them, draw it all together, and how we can actually use that to drive the different components from a central location, how we can start to orchestrate some of your tasks. So with that, we're able to actually bring in a level of automation, reusing the information and actually driving the products to actually perform actions for you from a service-based level. And they did that by bringing in another component into the suite, which is Orchestrator, which links heavily into Service Manager, which we'll touch on very briefly later. So going behind the actual clouds and behind the scenes, rather than just concentrating purely on actually provisioning services through something like Virtual Machine Manager or monitoring what's going on with them, but actually how can we take that information about what alerts we've got within Operations Manager, pull them across as incidents or problems within Service Manager, and then actually use the Service Manager in terms of things like release records or change requests to actually enact provisioning of services or deployments of software or actioning on them alerts from Operations Manager. And then, without stealing too much of Damien's thunder later, one of the new components that have just been introduced is the Windows Azure pack. and how we can actually utilize all this information to build on top of that to actually deliver in a more seamless experience and consistent approach between both on-premise and public clouds. So Service Manager at its very base is focused around delivering the ITIL processes. So they are incident, change, problem, release records for when we want to actually commission new systems, the ones that everyone knows about, as well as within the 2012 release, which is the new one, is request fulfillment or service requests. Service Manager helps you actually surface this as a self-service option through portals or interactions via email conversations, as well as actually storing all this data in a warehouse or data warehouse for long-term reporting, archive and analysis, where you can actually start to provide information back to your end users and see how your service is actually performing and running. So at its heart is the CMDB. This is core to Service Manager. It's a fully relational database, takes all the information about your configuration items, which are drawn in from that bottom layer on the slide around the different components, from the integration with the different System Center components, things like Microsoft's Active Directory, as well as third-party management tools that you can hook in and actually utilize things like Service Manager to basically reach out to any type of system to gather information. So by pulling all this information into the CMDB as configuration items, we can then start to add on to the CMDB. We've got things like your work items, which are your instance and your change, how they relate to the different CIs, and utilising the different templates within the system that I'll show you to actually surface that information and be able to record the relevant stuff to yourselves, as well as a strong knowledge base stored within Service Manager to help your analysts and your end users actually resolve incidents and problems a lot quicker. So let's actually just break out from the slides for a minute and actually have a look at what Service Manager looks like. So this is my Service Manager console that I've had open ready, and I'm actually within the work items area at the minute. So this is, as I keep on saying about these ITIL processes, where you do go in to enact things around incident management or change management. So if we have a very quick look at incident management, we have this tree view where we can actually view the different type of incidents that are open or the different statuses that they're in. At present I have a couple of incidents that are open, and if I look at this one very briefly, you can see I recorded some very basic information. But one of the most important things, I've got some immediate feedback that actually my service level objective on my SLAs are actually being breached. And I have this wonderful little red icon telling me that I've actually failed to deliver this on the time that it was supposed to be enacted. So SLAs are actually recorded and managed through the service level management focus of Service Manager, where we can actually define what type of working hours that we do. I really do wish these are the hours that I tend to work. That would be absolutely wonderful. However, it's not. It's just for demo purposes. But on top of here, I can actually relate what metrics and what service level objectives it is that I want to meet. Now, I only have within my demo environment the single one that I want to be able to show, and that's a priority 1 based incident, in which I've said that my targets are actually to try and resolve my calls within 15 minutes and then let me know that I've got an SLA about to breach within 5 minutes. Hence that one that I logged a minute ago being very harsh and having already breached. We see we get this colourful feedback in terms of letting the actual analyst know that this information has been done. Creating instance is very easy. We have a very quick create incident button where we can start to gather information based on either the telephone conversation or the user that's come to actually see us. Now, because of the links heavily into the different System Center products and Active Directory, we can actually start to rely on the information that we pulled out. However, as you can see within my environment at the minute, I don't actually have any users as such, apart from the base ones that create from the installation of the product, which I do actually want to rectify now. And that's because I need to actually help build some of the information into my CMDB. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to show you how to pull some of that information out from the various different systems and into the CMDB in just a few very easy clicks. So the CMDB is built based on connectors. So these can be either connectors to the various other System Center components. So we can see from my side, I have connectors out of the box into both Active Directory and the various other System Center components. Now I already have some within my environment, so we can see that I've got my orchestrator link, my operations manager, my virtual machine manager. And I could also, if required, import directly from a CSV file. So the one thing that I am missing from here is, like I said, is users. So I want to very quickly create an Active Directory connector. So if you start your click counts now, we should be able to get through the one click. We'll give it a descriptive name. Now, for this example, I'm just going to take everything out of my domain. However, as a point of reference, you should be very careful around the Active Directory connectors because it can consume a lot of information that's stored within your Active Directory. And a lot of that might not be so relevant for when you're actually trying to do service level management. For example, you might not want an area where you have staging accounts. So be granular and actually break down the type of information that you want to bring in. I have my Run As account. So I need to supply a password in which to connect to Active Directory. And again, I have a more granular control at this point. Rather than within this example I'm going to bring across everything, again I can start to filter down using standard LDAP queries to say exclude disabled user accounts or inactive computers, for example. But for now I'm just going to choose everything. One thing I will make sure that I tick though is the do not write null values. One thing I always suggest is this is ticked. It saves a lot of information being overwritten and what you call flip-flopping from different connectors that will bring in the similar types of information, but one system might have no information, the other system does, and you'll get that flip-flopping between writing a null value and already having null or something else within the system. And there we go. It's as easy as that for creating a connector. This will now start to connect up to Active Directory and pull down that information that I've asked for. And just for good measures, I'm going to kick off a Synchronize Now option. So when we start to get this rich information into our CMDB, so like I say, we can actually connect to Active Directory, get information around users, their different accounts. It also, if you've got it enabled within Active Directory for your organizational hierarchy in terms of line managers and actual employees, it will start to bring that information across as well as connecting to things like Configuration Manager to gather software and hardware inventory, Operations Manager to gather some more hardware CI information, as well as more rich information around what computers might have, things like SQL Server, IIS, and the services that you're modeling and monitoring within Operations Manager. So we can take that information and we can actually start to build up service offerings to our end users. So rather than just capturing everything as an incident when it's not actually something that's broken, but more a case of here is something that we offer, would you like to request it? The service catalog should be the definitive defined set of services that your organization offers, and that's what Service Manager and what I'm going to show you now can help you deliver. So if we have a look within the library section, we have the option to actually create or manage our service catalog. And the service catalog is made up of two types. They're made up of service offerings, which is this wide sweeping collection of different requests. So the requests are individual things such as a new user, whereas the service offering might be something like account management. Within there we actually get to define things like the SLAs and the costs that are attached to it, as well as any other extra information that we want to present to users, which we can then surface through the self-service portal. So for this example, I'm going to create a service offering to allow people to actually request a new user. So one of the first things I want to do is actually just define some of the templates that we'll use to actually create and capture some of the information. So the first one I want to create is going to be a runbook new user template. We're going to base this on a different class, which is our runbook automation, and store it within a management pack. So management packs, very much like Operations Manager uses, they're XML files used within Service Manager. So we want to capture some base information for the template, so we're going to call it create new user. We then want to actually select what runbook we want to actually go off and perform this action. So this is a runbook that we've designed within System Center Orchestrator, and I'll show you that in a minute. And this has actually been brought across into the CMDB via the connector, and it actually then presents the type of information that we're using within the actual runbook to actually prompt for information. And we're going to map them to various different text properties within the actual runbook automation activity that I'm designing now. So we have a prompt, or we will be prompting the user for first name, surname, department. We're then going to mark this template as ready for automation because we have a runbook attached to it, and we'll save that into the system. There we go. So we now have our new runbook template. So to actually use that runbook automation activity, we also now need to create a new service request template. And we're going to make this of type service request. So it's a very similar type of process. We have a template where we want to set some of the base information. So now this is where we actually get to define what type of priority or impact that this request has. Now this isn't exactly a overly critical request, creating a new user, so I'm just going to give it a low medium priority. We'll leave source empty for now because this could be either enacted through the console or the self-service portal, as we're going to show later. Otherwise we could select it as a default option. This is going to be within our directory account management area, and we're going to assign it to no one at the minute. We'll leave the affected user blank as well because that information is going to come in through the portal. What we do, however, now have is the ability to actually define what our workflow looks like. So for this example, I'm going to make it really easy. Before a new user is actually created, I want to actually put in a review activity. I want to have a stage where somebody can actually look at this task and decide whether this is actually going to happen or not. So review request for new user. We'll make it so the line manager of whoever's requesting this new user should look for it. And you could add a couple of people in here to actually approve whether they are actually going to actually allow this service request to happen. Now we can see that from earlier I only had a couple of accounts. Now that Active Directory connector's in and it's pulling information into my CMDB, I've got a lot more. However, my Active Directory isn't exactly the best in terms within my environment, so I've got a lot of what I'd call junk because I didn't filter it down properly. However, I do know this is the account that I'm currently logged on as, so I want myself to be able to vote, and I have veto, and I must vote on this. Because I don't have a line manager, I'm not going to leave that ticked for now. Otherwise that would actually look at the account information within Active Directory and pull out the requesting user's line manager automatically and add them into this review activity. So the only other step I really want within this is once the request has been reviewed and approved, I want to actually enact this runbook activity. And we can see here now it's opening up this template that I created earlier. I have my base title and I also have my runbook information. So I'm going to put that in there. And that's all I want to do now for now with the service request. So to be able to actually create a request for users to use, we need to actually create a request offering. So from here we just step through the wizard. This is going to be simply called create new user. Use this request to ask for user. And then again we're back to templates. So we actually have a service request template ready stacked for this that you just saw me create. And now we start to get prompted for the different types of information. So we can tell the user, please fill out this form fully. And then we can actually put some prompts in here. So we know that we're going to ask them for first name. We're going to ask them for surname. And we're also going to ask for department. Now we could actually make these optional if required, but we can also use different types of information gathering. So if it was a case of we wanted to say, when does this new user start, we could actually present a date picker to allow them to pick a date rather than typing it in, as well as all sorts of things like lists. So we could actually have a drop down list and say, please choose one of these. In actual fact, we're going to use a list type value for the department. So this is where we actually get to configure what's actually happening within here. We can put any sort of validation behind it, whether we allow anything, whether we're only allowed to have names that are a maximum of 15 characters long, as well as being able to actually define what's in this simple list. So like I say, this is a simple list. So we're going to have the option of sales, IT, and let's go for human resources. A very simple list rather than one that we might have predefined within the system elsewhere that we want to use over and over. Now this is where we actually get to map some of these prompts. So using that information that's within our run book, so we saw earlier we had the options of text 1, text 2, text 3. We know that text 1 wants mapping to the output of the form of surname, first name, surname for text 2, and we're going to push department into text 3 value. We could start to link knowledge base articles to give the user that overall approach, so when they're logging something they can have knowledge base articles to hand to see what impact it's going to have, what else information they need to fill in, any problems they may encounter, or any further procedures they need to follow. Then finally we get the option of what we want to do with this, and we're actually going to publish this information into the actual self-service portal, and we'll create that service offering now. So within my service catalog I now actually have a create new user request offering that I just created. Within here we've captured some various information, including giving the user some prompts that we want to fill in and some configuration around the back end, such as on the first name we limited it to 15 characters. Oops. We limited it to a maximum of 15 characters, as well as our department we actually configured a very simple list to give the users a drop down option. But more importantly we just mapped these to the actual input parameters that are within our orchestrator runbook. So within System Center Orchestrator I defined a very simple, and I can't stress this enough, this is not a production, this is just an example of what I want to happen when somebody fills in the request offering from Service Manager. I want it to invoke this runbook. I've asked it to pass across various information such as first name, surname and department, generate a random password, and then go across to Active Directory and create me a user based on that information that's flowing across the runbook process but gathered by Service Manager. That runbook and its initial prompts are sucked into the CMDB via Service Manager and its orchestrator connector, and then we can actually map information that we're gathering from a service request into that runbook and push it across when we actually invoke it. So within the service catalog we have request offerings and service offerings. We've created a request offering, but that doesn't actually surface anything within the self-service portal. So as we can see, my self-service portal is blank and empty at the minute because we don't have any published service offerings. So service offerings are this overarching category of what we want to contain a collection of request offerings. So very quickly I'm going to create a service offering. We're going to call it account management. We could make this pretty and specify our own little pretty icon, but for this example I'm just going to skip through it. Now we get options here to actually capture some of the service level information that we want to present back to users when they're actually looking to actually request a service. So from in here, new accounts will be done within 15 minutes and accounts are free. Now we could push other information back out to them regards external links to the intranet, but as well as we can actually link this to related services. So going back to the information that we suck in via the CMDB about making the CMDB very rich, I have information about my Active Directory actually brought across from Operations Manager. So I'm going to link it to this because creating an account is related to the Active Directory service. We have no knowledge articles within my system, but again we can present more information back to the user, help them to help themselves. But in terms of the request offering, I want to actually add in my new user request. There it is, create new user. And we want to make this request offering now a published service offering. So within our self-service portal now, that should actually come across on a refresh. There we go. So this is where you get to actually now start to look to help yourself, to help others help themselves, otherwise known as self-service for short. And this is that ability to actually use that information that you're capturing and creating within Service Manager, and rather than making it somewhere that your end users have to ring the service desk or send in an email that isn't very clear and a bit vague and bouncing information backwards and forwards between your analysts and your end users, by structuring this service catalogue to what you do actually offer as a service to your end users, we can then surface up into the self-service portal to allow users to actually help themselves. So this is the one we created a minute ago, our account management service offering, which happens to contain a request offering for creating a new user. We can see some of this cost and SLA information that we put in earlier. Users can actually start to see whether they need to think about getting purchase orders ready beforehand. But if not, they can actually drive through the service requests and actually start to fill out some forms based on that information that we structured earlier for capturing. You can see these are mandatory fields, so I'm getting specified for them. So I will type in some information. Notice the first name I did put a restriction on. I cannot type more than 15 characters. I can also choose from that simple list I created what department I want to be in. We can submit this information and we're done. But in full transparency, the user actually gets feedback in terms of what their actual request ID is, and they can then actually keep an eye on what is going on. They don't have to ring the service desk every 2 minutes. They can see what the status of their service request is and how that actually drives forward in terms of providing input back or forward without having to constantly bother them. So I've talked about Service Manager a bit, I've talked about the different ITIL workflows, we've got incident management in there, change management, how we can actually structure the information we want to gather so we can use templates to define out what our actual process or our business process workflows look like, whether we need to have review activities, manual activities, but it's more a case of actually when you start to integrate it with the other System Center components, we can get much more value out of Service Manager. So we've already seen that by pulling in the different information through the use of connectors with the different System Center components, I can get a much richer view of our estate rather than having to flick between different systems. A lot of people will say that, well, I've got Configuration Manager, so I have a CMDB. I do my inventory from there. The trouble is with something like Configuration Manager, it's not a true CMDB. The information usually has a default timescale of about 90 days. And you can't keep a track on true changes to the actual system. And it's not relational either. You can't see what impact a change request or a release request has on different CIs. Whereas within Service Manager, it actually aggregates all this information into one place. We can see what's happening, it builds upon it, but we also get a true history view of all the different changes that we see within the system, anything new that's added, and also what that relationship change is between the different systems and the different CIs. Pulling the information in around things like Operations Manager, we immediately start to get benefits over things like business services. So these are the things that you monitor. When you're actually monitoring them, you know the different components. You've structured your distributed application. So straight away within Service Manager, we get to view that information. If an alert was raised within Operations Manager for an individual component or a server that happens to form part of my Configuration Manager environment, I would actually get that reflected within Service Manager as an affected service. So in terms of doing service management and reporting on what is affected within my business at a service layer, I can see that my Configuration Manager service, in this example, has been affected because such and such a server went down. Rather than just having a very narrow view of an incident that's been logged against the server, I know that it's had a service impact, just purely by linking Service Manager into Operations Manager, and it pulls this information back automatically for us, so we can see things around Configuration Manager for this example, such as what is my site database, where's my WSUS points. All the information that you would normally have to structure and manually maintain are done automatically. Again, without stealing Damien's thunder, if I go to my Windows Azure Management Portal, so I just want to show you how versatile System Center can be. If I can remember my login details. By extending and reaching out to the different System Center products. So this is actually an add-on that's been provided recently, and you can find this using the web platform installer by a company called Grid Pro that actually enhances Service Manager but links into the Windows Azure portal, where users can have a different option if you want to drive all services through a familiar interface, in terms of using the Windows Azure portal to link back into Service Manager. And you can see here's that same service request offering that I did earlier, but presented in a different manner. There we go, and we've submitted another service request. So there's lots of different approaches that you can take with Service Manager and where it fits within your environment, and building on it with the different System Center components. Like I say, Orchestrator can be used to actually help you automate some of your run-of-the-mill normal activities, account management, requests for software, whatever you can think of, you can generally automate and then provide as a service request within Service Manager. So I'd like to thank you for attending this. I hope you found it very useful. It's certainly a very high level overview, and there's also an awful lot that I could have fitted in, but within 25 minutes it's a bit of a tight time scale to provide you with absolutely everything within Service Manager. But you should have a very good understanding now between the different ITIL workflows that it can be run as a normal service desk, branching out into a rich CMDB that's very easy to maintain, automatically maintained when linked with the different System Center components, very quick to build and get that information, and then moving into actually defining between what is a incident, what has gone wrong, and actual what requests, or sorry, what services your business offers to your users within a defined service catalog, and presenting them back through a self-service interface to actually help users help themselves and drive that and take a lot of burden away from the IT department. And then also how it integrates into the different System Center components to give a much fuller and richer experience. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. My name's Steve Beaumont, and there's some details on screen.